have Manasa today, who is a well-known architect, has been in the industry for 12 years.
Interior design is a subset of architecture pretty much. There are various more. I think this confusion starts where a client walks in. They know what they want, but they don't know who they're coming to.
Vastu, I think, is like the most primary thing that everybody's seen.
In my initial years of practice, I used to look at it as a creative block. Vastu here in Hyderabad might not be applicable to what's happening in the north, near Ganga. To have an aesthetic home itself is probably a desire, a want, and not need. As long as you have a roof over your head, you're done with it, right? It begins with what kind of a ratio you establish between your wants and your needs. It goes by Bogadyam, which is the usefulness, and two is Sukhadarshana, the physical visual aesthetics. The third would be Ramyam. We try to achieve the joy or the inner delight.
Say smaller spaces, how can you make it look larger?
Lighter colors always give a sense of expanse.
What are the most common mistakes does an architect make?
Probably not educating the client enough about how hard we work.
Okay. Okay. Your top 3 advice to the buyers out there who want to hire an architect. Hi everyone, we have Manasa today, who is a well-known architect and has been in the industry for 12 years. Manasa, thank you so much for coming on today's episode.
Thank you.
We're very, very happy to have you. If you could, tell us a little bit about your journey, how it all started and how it's been so far for you.
I'm the principal architect at my firm Arna.
Okay.
I have been in this field since the last 12 years, like you mentioned. I did my bachelor's of architecture from BMS in Bangalore.
Okay.
And went to Milan for interior studies in hotel designing, and also have some experience with the Green Skills Academy and Indian Institute of Science, where we did a workshop on sustainable homes and types of construction pertaining to that.
Okay.
And yes, and I started my firm. And
How has it been for you so far, the whole journey?
It's been great. We are a multidisciplinary firm. We're into retail, residential mainly, and commercial as well.
So, Mansa, today's episode, right? A lot of people, it's a very important aspect, is what I think. And a lot of people, I think, have this perception of, don't know what a difference between an architect or a designer. See, I'm a layman myself. So, I think the audience would want to know, what are the categories of it and what, who does what.
Right.
Yeah.
To begin with, I think, let me put it this way. Interior design is a subset of architecture pretty much. And there are various more, like you mentioned, there's interior decoration as well. I think this confusion starts where a client walks in or they know what they want, but they don't know who they're coming to.
Right.
Architecture is a 5-year-long course, and you come out with a bachelor's in architecture, and there's a governing body, Council of Architecture, which gives you a license to practice. And it's a technical education as well. It is not only art, it's basically art and science put together.
Yeah. And I think there's another confusion, most of them have. An architect and also a structural engineer.
Right.
I don't know it myself, so if you can give some clarity.
See, an architect is somebody who plans the home, perceives in the form of sketches and puts together on an empty plot. And a structural engineer is where he comes and reinforces the plan and is responsible for its standing in terms of strength and the hardness of the structure.
Got it.
And if I may just, I feel I missed a thing or two while putting interior designing and decoration also together.
Yeah.
For instance, if you take a wall, now an architect will know what goes behind constructing a wall, whether it's a brick wall or whether it's a mud wall or, whether there are these electrical and plumbing conduits that are running. How can we break it open? And even if we do, to what extent can we redefine it? Whereas an interior designer will know what to clad on it. We can do a decorative wallpaper or ply paneling. And an interior decorator is somebody who places a console or a sideboard in front of it and accentuates the place with artifacts. So I think that's the way I would maybe.
You've put it very beautifully, you know. So, like now I understand,
Yeah,
you know, who plays what kind of role in everything coming to life, right? So, and I think then I want to then further go down to when should we, you know, say get an architect into a picture, a designer into a picture, or
What stage of the project?
Yes.
So, I mean, it's different when it's an apartment.
Okay.
And if it's an empty plot of land where the client wants to build a home. So, maybe I'll go with the apartment first. Like I said, the architect is the captain of the ship. So, you need to go in as early as if the builder permits that where the walls are being constructed of your apartment. And if they're not shear walls, that is, they're not the structural walls, where there are, you can redefine the spaces by breaking it down. That's the start point when it's an apartment.
Okay.
When it's an empty plot of land, yes, once you purchase the land, then
Yeah,
it's all yours.
okay.
And
All right. And when does a designer come in? Is it usually only after?
the interior designer,
Yeah.
so there are two ways. There are firms like ours and many more where architecture and interior designing is a part,
Okay.
is offered as a service. If not, once the architect puts the plans across, is a very good stage to actually also engage an interior designer.
Okay. And why
Even
do you
before the
suggest we do
construction.
that?
So that if there's something from the micro scale point of view in terms of interior layouts, if there's something that can be brought to the table at the beginning, it will the client will benefit.
So I've come across, you know, a lot of firms, like designing firms, interior designing firms, where, you know, maybe they don't have like a certificate. So say I hire a designer who does not have like a official certificate versus a designer with an official certificate, but equal experience. What are the pros and cons of it?
See, formal education is something that does turn out as an advantage for the client. Having said that, there's a lot of self-learning. This whole field of creativity is you need to have that fire every day. Just because you have a formal education also doesn't mean that you're catching up. You need to catch up with the trends. You need to be in touch with what are the new materials in the market and what are the feasibility of that application of those materials and all. So I think the advantage what we get with formal background, there are some principles that have been taught during the course, which you will put into play in your practice. Yeah.
Okay, so you say that it must be a combination of both experience and certificate.
Yes.
Like formal
For interior
education.
designers.
Yeah.
But having said that, architecture is something you need a formal training for the 5 years where you come out with a degree
Okay.
that is given by the Council of Architecture.
All right. Further going to, you know, so now, okay, I understand what are the, you know, pros and cons of someone having a formal education and someone just having experience, right? Suppose say I've bought a house and I would like, I'm sure it's different for an apartment and different for a house. Now, say for an apartment, it's done, handover is happening. Now, how, as a customer, should I shortlist a designer for myself or an architect?
To begin with, I think the client and the architect should connect, and the sensibilities, the design sensibilities have to be aligned. So thanks to the social media, you also have a lot of interior designers and architects having a set style of their own. So if you've scouted and you found something that you like, that's where you begin with. Say you haven't been exposed to social media and a burst of Pinterest images. There's a lot of referrals that happens in this field. Word of mouth, where we would have done a previous relative's home or a friend's home, where they know our processes and the keen interest and detailing that we get into. So that kind of also moves around, yeah.
Okay. So, so what you're saying is that whether it's a apartment or a house, what role does an architect play? And what role does the interior designer play? What is the depth of it?
There's an architect who is guiding you through your new home, which is an apartment. You have a little more feasibility to open up the plan.
Okay.
In the sense like we can redefine the spaces.
Okay.
Like I said, because the architects know what the walls that can be broken and the technicalities behind it.
Right. Okay.
And then the cosmetic and the aesthetics can be taken care after that. So that's the advantage you get with an architect.
Right. Got it. Okay. And usually I think it's a common story, right? I say, suppose have a budget. I'm talking recently about my friend who, okay, she had a budget, but it shot up by 30%,
Right.
40%. And she said that it's actually, it's very common to shoot up to more than what your budget is. So why do you think that happened?
See, to begin with, to have an aesthetic home itself is probably a desire, a want, and not a need. As long as you have a roof over your head and you have all the functionalities, all the services taken care, that is water, electricity and all, you're done with it, right? So it begins with what kind of a ratio you establish between your wants and your needs. Yeah, we do guide them, we help them with what all are there available in the market. And most of the times it is because the clients wanting something that has, that has really caught their eye, which they probably did not pay attention to earlier, or they came across, something that they saw on their travels, or, in a relative's home or something like that. Those are the most of the reasons why it kind of goes up. So if your decision making is a key element to keep your budget intact. And having said that, when the budget is told to the designer, I think the client benefits with a better service from our end. Okay. That is, say if it's the budget is 100, 20% of it can be flooring, or 10% also can be flooring. So we kind of play in the numbers, the proportions, trying to give them the best within that budget.
Okay.
So giving a transparent or a clear budget really is and decision making, sticking to something that we've decided, or the brainstorming that happens can take longer in the initial stages, but once you're done there and you begin your journey, you hit the floor. That is, you start works on site.
Got it.
Once the works on site begin and then you start changing, you built a wall and then you are going to break down the wall. Definitely. So there are a lot of these loopholes where the cost goes up as well.
In that sense, right, what do you think commonly, what are the biggest mistakes that your clients have made where they spent and something they shouldn't have?
Yeah. So see, when it's a residence, it's they at some point also want to own it, right? Some sort of customization we do offer. Maybe I wouldn't say a mistake, but maybe ignorance. They perhaps maybe thought, what they're putting money into is what will be appreciated aesthetically, visually. Might not be the case at the end of the project. Something else that we've been kind of insisting on, because we've had previous experience with the material, but that doesn't come through. So that kind of a little bit of variation is where maybe I wouldn't say mistakes, but differences happen.
So ideally, where should most of the part of the budget for interior designing or the aesthetics part of it, where should they put most of it? Like, what are the main categories that they put?
I think that we can kind of categorize it into what is a constant and what is a variable. So a constant is flooring, the type of construction of the wall. A variable is like loose furniture, which can be changed or moved out when you're moving out, or whatever the reason is. So between those two, if you see whatever the fixed modules in the home, it's advisable to kind of invest on those.
Okay.
A durable flooring. If it's tropical belt, it's hot here, right? So a stone, it cools you. On barefoot, a stone is the most advised in our kind of environments.
Okay.
So
for flooring.
For flooring.
Okay.
And the kind of paint because it gets hot in summers. So things that don't radiate much. And when it comes to the roof, you can invest in things like insulating your roof. Like if you're having a penthouse, a lot of times the clients just go in for false ceiling. But there are ways where you can have another layer called rock wool, which kind of insulates the home, and the air conditioning is more efficient. So the long life of the space is where you can invest more in.
Okay, so something that improves the living inside
Environment,
the house. So, Mansu, what's the typical price range for an architect or an interior designer in Hyderabad?
So it actually starts off at somewhere around 200 per square feet. If it's Hyderabad, there are a lot of places where it is based on the total value of the project, a certain percentage of the value of the project.
Okay.
But like I said, it goes on. It starts off at 200, but depending on the complexity of the project and the kind of involvement of the architect and the name that he or she made for himself, it can go up to 1,000, 2,000 per square feet as well.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So maybe look at it like, like how one project is different from another project, depending on how much, they've given as amenities or the quality of the project and the quality of the architect. So,
yes. And also the client, like I said, they really need to connect. They need to click.
Okay.
Especially when it's a residential, personal space that you're kind of venturing out and you're hiring an architect. You really need to kind of take the journey together for, for a very important part of your life. So,
So, you think all architects do that? Because, yes, they are architects who are known to have certain styles, right? But are they able to accommodate the client's needs? Because they do have a certain set of things, how they approach, say, a design.
Yeah. So, they will definitely be able to cater to, because our practices usually break down into, like, for example, if you're talking about my practice, so there are 3 design principles that we follow. It's from one of the ancient architectural texts, which really fascinated me, so I really stuck by it. Ante adelante it goes by Bhogadyam 1, which is the usefulness, the utility of a space.
Right. Okay.
And 2 is Sukhadarshanam, meaning the physical, visual aesthetics. What looks good, the cosmetics.
Yeah.
And the 3rd would be Ramyam, which is we try to achieve the joy or the inner delight for the architects as well as the users. Okay. So we really kind of touch upon these 3 in the process of design.
Okay, so basically, like you said, until you do, start the journey with your client, you can't really achieve the
right. But also that we follow in every project that we do, and I think the education to the client as in what all we are going to do, what the deliverables are going to be, is extremely important, so there are no misunderstandings.
Setting the right expectations.
Yeah, setting the expectations is very important for a complete and a happy handover.
Yes. Now that you've told me the price, say, however, I don't have as much budget. Okay, how do I take that forward?
Like I said, if the client is open about his budget, we can still work around it.
Okay.
To achieve all that I have been mentioning before.
Okay. So you're saying that I can give you a budget, whether it's minimal or it's extensive.
Yeah.
You will be able to accommodate, to my needs in a certain way, depending on my budget.
Like you said, you rightly said, to your needs.
Yeah.
Now your wants are unlimited.
Yeah.
So a little bit of want.
So my want might reduce in the budget that I, which I may not have, depending on the extensive budget that I might have. And also, I think another common factor that I want to address is, say there's a, timeline that we've set for the project to get done. But there's always the case that it gets extended. Why do you think that happens?
There are 2-3 reasons for that. One is in our country, we do have a lot of holidays.
Yeah.
So that needs to be taken into account when we begin. And decision making. So what you decide in the first 2 months of designing, if you start making changes, you see that that lag on site. And I would say decision making, taking into account the working hours, the feasibility of the site surroundings for the workers to work. Sometimes in apartments there are very strict timings, so a lot of work doesn't happen. That way there's a lot of delays.
Okay, I think, there's a lot of cribbing about that, when the client, there's always a delay and all of that. But I want the audience to understand your point of view, right? So even when they hire an architect, they should understand what goes behind.
If it's the execution side of it, which is on site, one must understand that, when you're building something, when you're constructing something that has to last, it's very common that it requires a certain time. Like when you build a wall, it's not that the day you put brick over brick, the wall is done. It needs something called as curing, setting time to gain its strength. In the same way, when it's woodwork, there is a certain time that it takes for it to be a quality work.
Right.
I think educating the client about it, and like you said, not only the budget shooting up, I think the time extension also can be discussed in the beginning to kind of avoid the, unpleasantness.
And again, what I want to touch upon is Vastu. I think like the most primary thing that everybody sees, right?
Yes, I think especially in Hyderabad as well. But it has spread across the country a lot now. So yes, Vastu is something that in my initial years of practice, I used to look at it as a creative block.
Okay.
They're not letting me, do my work beyond the ordinary and, do something that is like a wow. So, but then what happens is it's very client specific as well. Residences, clients are very particular. And in a lot of cases, whether it's like to be heard by the clients or not, it is fear driven. Right. But they come from their own, I know where they're coming from and it's justified. So the best what we can do with Vastu is that we come to the table together, the Vastu consultant and us, and we kind of debate over it and say, no, this is a bit impractical. This is a bit inconvenient just because it is, fear driven. So let's not do this. And we come to a consensus there.
Okay.
But otherwise, we do follow basics of Vastu, as in southwest zone of the home should be the master bedroom, and northeast should be lower than the southwest, and it should have a water body, things like that. But having said that, I'm not sure if the Vastu consultants will like what they're hearing, but it is very site contextual.
Okay.
It's very site specific. It's climatology based actually.
Okay.
So what is Vastu here in Hyderabad might not be applicable to what's happening in the north, near Ganga.
Yeah.
So, but I don't want to get into it too much.
Okay.
So yeah.
Okay. But what you're saying is, it's very scientific.
Yes.
It's related to what's happening in that location.
Yes. The local winds, the quality of soil, and of course the incident sunlight.
Yeah.
And
lifestyle of the people, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
That who live there, and of course it's very different.
Because Vastu is actually it's very, very ancient, like yoga.
Yeah, yeah.
So it has been trickling down in various different forms. It needn't be the same what it was. So
yeah. But is it true it's mostly scientific? Vastu is supposedly mostly scientific.
It is. Yeah.
Okay. In most cases, does it happen that it interferes with your designing?
It does. But I think with 12 years of practice and experience now, that we know how to kind of navigate through it and navigate through it and still get a good design.
All right.
And it has happened, so I wouldn't complain as much.
So it doesn't
now.
trouble you as much as it used to.
Yeah.
Okay. What are the most common mistakes or errors does an architect make?
Probably not educating the client enough about how hard we work.
Okay. Okay.
And they don't even know that architects and designers are solving problems of these clients, of our clients, which they don't even know of.
Okay. Like for example,
Like I mentioned, like if it's a penthouse and all that they know is that, okay, we'll be having a false ceiling, we'll be having this. So that's when we guide them and, advise them with, no, you know what, it'll be post the home is done, it'll be cooler if you do this rock wool insulation for your roof. Or they come up with a lot of sometimes irrational requirements. You have 100 square feet of space, but there'll be so many things you require.
Okay.
So, taking them through like what will fit and what will not, what doesn't work. And sometimes we also surprise clients with something that is unexpected. One of my clients who was a doctor, the house was done and we were looking for art, the final stage of art and artifacts. And art is not, the original art is not that cheap. It comes quite expensive. And over a casual conversation one day, she was telling me that she has her mom's saris, where old saris which have that petite point under. It's a kind of an embroidery from the mid-century. That's very, very rare now. So I said, that's brilliant. Why do you want me and you to go looking for art which is not personified? It's not so close to you. Meera teeskurandi, we'll see how we work around it. And we had it all over the place. And it just turned out brilliant. So these are the things where the client doesn't know that we can think even on their behalf.
Yeah, you can actually sometimes bring out their stories.
Yes.
Okay.
So I think, trust is a major factor here because we're dealing with their personal space. They also are coming forward and, coming out with a lot of trust in us. And that should go till the end of the project.
Right.
You lose it in the middle, you lose the traction of, even the designer doesn't feel that creative if we see a sense of, a lack of trust from the client's end.
So I'm going to ask you, talking about trust, and I think that's what the journey starts with, right?
Yeah.
Especially in this case.
Yeah.
As an architect, how do you build trust with a client? But as a client, what should one do to give that trust to an architect? Just not on the technical side of it, but, on all levels.
Right.
So, when anyone from the audience who's hiring an architect, they know these are the things I can look at and, place my trust on them.
So I think this is for us, architects and designers, where the honest approach of design speaks a long way. So when we sit down to, the first few meetings, we kind of, the bond organically happens over a conversation of, what they do for a living or what their background has been. And in those 2-3 meetings, you usually click. That is what architects can do, is that being honest about, what they can give and how they want to navigate the space, taking the personality and the rest of the members of the family, how we want to give the best we can. That's all that we can do at the beginning. And of course, unless they have seen, in a lot of cases, they have seen our previous works and they can see our work speak for itself. In those cases, it's easier. But for a beginner, I think it's, you need to take that leap of faith. The client needs to take that leap of faith.
I mean, like you said, leap of faith, right? But that has to come with a base on something, right? I think for me, as if I have to hire an architect, like you said, it should be someone who understands my way of life, right, on a daily basis, and build that around me, right?
Yeah.
So, and if he's able to do that with an honesty in terms of what can be done and what can't be done, like you said, I think that's enough.
Yeah.
And I think mutually you meet halfway.
Right.
Have you had situations where you struggled with many people being involved in a project?
Yeah, that's a constant struggle. So we do request for a one-point contact.
Okay.
But a lot of times, and also coming back to kind of cycling back to the question why delays happen.
Yeah.
The works have started on site, and the the rest of the members of the family come and they're like, oh, I didn't know this. Why did you do this? So those are the cost escalations, much more delay on site. So that's a constant struggle, and it's like a sincere request, like, don't do this. It's not good for you, and it's not good for us.
Yeah. And I think, Mansa, it would be great to get your advice. Suppose I want to buy a house. What should I look at?
You mean
Say an apartment.
apartment.
I'm sure the specifics will be different for, say, a house or a...
Villa and an apartment.
Yeah. So if you can, define it and tell us.
I think to begin with, it's the geographical location to your work. Those are some common things that one should see. And your lifestyle, your routine, what it requires. Like if you're a lot into yoga, a little bit of open space, more than the closed indoor spaces that the apartments have. And whether it's your common areas that you're going to be using more, or is it your bedroom spaces? So depending on that, because there are various types of layouts, right? Where the bedrooms, storage is a big hassle.
Right.
So good wardrobe spaces, right? So if the layout has a decent sized, as much as the room sometimes people ask for, is, a lot of it is solved. So those are the things that I think has been a constant struggle. Those, and also what I've, we have to adapt to the times, right? Now that there is Swiggy and there's Amazon, most of our shopping is online, and there are a lot of parcels, deliveries that happen throughout the course of time during the day. So, and we open up directly into the living rooms. So I feel builders also can maybe make a note of this, that having a small, area before you come into the house, to kind of stack up all of this, and you also to maintain that privacy.
So that's like more specific to, say, an apartment.
Yeah.
Anything technical that we need to look at?
Technical, yes. The quality of construction, or the materials that they're giving, the flooring, the paint quality, the doors.
How do we have access to that before you buy an apartment?
The builder will be giving the specifications.
Okay.
There is a list that they run by you, and if you're okay with the choice, is also an additional factor to deciding whether you want to take the house. Yeah.
Got it. Okay. And in terms of, again, just sticking to the apartment, right? You have the built-up area and the carpet area. First, I think you need to define that for our audience.
Right.
And what do we look at? Again, before buying the house. Right. About the, built up and
the carpet area. Carpet area is what is defined within the walls. That is your interior space. You kind of draw a line, the inside space of your individual apartment is a carpet area. Built up area is when you include the area of the walls, thickness of the walls as well.
Okay.
And the super built up area is when the builders also including some of the common amenities, the corridors, the lift lobbies. That includes the super built up area.
Okay, okay. And ideally, say when I'm, buying a house and all of these aspects are there, is there the specification that I need to look at and, go ahead with, anything that I need to keep an eye on in that aspect?
You need to have, of course, there are these norms that a certain percentage of the land should be given to an open space. Something that you can really look out to is how much of green space is there in the communities, because that is something that's lacking outside the communities in the city, with a lot of encroachment of lakes and parks and all of that. So that the lung space, it's called in a macro scale of planning, that's called a lung space.
Okay.
So that if you can find it comfortable and not just a concrete block, because at the end of the day, it's about the well-being of you and the users of the space, right? That is something that you should resonate with.
Okay.
There should be some minimum open space.
Got it.
Yeah.
So say if it's a independent house, like a villa, what should I look at?
Villa, there are certain things already taken care, like the open spaces, and each villa also will get a certain amount of land, which is for your own gardening sake, and like a deck that you can have outside. Otherwise, for villa, what you must look at is the feasibility of a lift. If, for future use or for senior citizens, one thing that we have to make sure is that there is, area or the technicalities of the villa, which is kept aside for a lift, even if you don't want it.
Okay.
To
Is everybody providing that?
most of the builders are actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
Talking about builders, I would also like to talk about most common mistakes that a builder could make that could affect, say, your designing aspects of it. Interfere
Or your
with that.
choice, you're saying. Choice of buying a place.
Yeah, correct. So, look out for, say, a builder common mistakes that a builder can make, right? That could interfere with your designing as well and save your clients' everyday life.
Right.
Yeah.
So one thing that I've noticed over the years is that more on a micro scale, like the individual apartments, the layout that is made, an interior layout that is made is usually they're showing a little more furniture that'll fit
Okay.
rather than what will actually fit.
Okay.
So that's a little bit of a scaling issue there.
Okay.
But otherwise, I think...
Yeah, but I think like that's not as, it's just perspective of the
Yeah,
size of
yeah.
the furniture. Yeah.
So it kind of gives the idea that, okay, this much is going to
Got
be,
it,
but the
got it.
ergonomics are a little different.
Right, got
So-
it. Okay. I think this will be, the large amount of audience that would want to know this. Say smaller spaces, how can you make it look larger and, optimize the functionality of the living space? Yeah.
To make any space look larger is to begin with lots of natural lighting, good ventilation, large fenestrations, and lighter colors always give a sense of expanse. So a lighter palette like your flooring is in the off-whites and whites. Because of the amount of reflection, it just feels, 1.5 times.
Okay.
And tall ceilings and tall doors give an enlarged feeling when you kind of walk through it.
Got it.
And anything that is...
You mean like the tall doors?
Yeah, taller doors than the usual and good ceiling heights.
Okay.
Because volume automatically, becomes bigger. So if you're not doing false ceiling, your space will look a little taller.
Okay.
But a lot of services are taken care in the false ceiling. We can, and lighter palettes, like I said.
Like pastel color.
Pastels or, and if something is looking smaller, it's because you've done everything very dark. Kind of it pulls the light. It kind of absorbs the light.
Got it.
Lighter colors always bounce off the light.
Reflects.
Yeah.
Okay. So what, in your sense, right, is trending right now in terms of design? If you could give a few and, so our audience...
You mean styles?
Yes. Yeah, styles, yeah.
Style, there's a lot going on right now. There's eclectic, which is like a lot of things, and a lot of colors and objects put together.
Okay.
Multicolor. And there's something called as dopamine, which is like high on bright colors.
Okay.
That's another style. And we have the boho chic, which are pastels and very earthy. And there's a lot of work being done in the market in terms of materials, whether it's imported or whether it's made here. Sustainability is something that's really taking off.
Okay.
Materials that are sustainable. The process of how it is made is being sustainable. So if the client is conscious of all of these, there's a good choice now. Yeah.
Okay. So personally, do you like doing projects like that want to push towards sustainability?
Yes, that would be a personal choice actually. Yeah.
Okay. Mansa, I have noticed this. This is out of what I've seen. I see that, there are a lot of layouts similar to each other, whether it's a villa, whether it's a flat. Why do you think that is?
That is also, there are a few reasons. One would be Vastu. And the other would be that for the sake of cost optimization, there's a repetitive formwork that happens when you're constructing.
Okay.
Which builders use and which is taken here and it's used for many other projects of theirs,
Okay.
which is also the reason for
Okay.
the repetition that you see.
So, because it makes it easier, the whole workflow?
Yes.
Is that why?
And it's
Okay.
cost optimization.
Okay.
for
So,
them.
Yeah, eventually that's what
Yeah.
it leads to. Okay.
So that kind of monotony we see in all the structures.
And I think now I want to come to that question which might offend you in some sense. Now IKEA is giving designs out, right? Like consulting. What is your view on that? And how is it different
Right.
from hiring an architect or going to an IKEA?
I think maybe not only IKEA, there are many more where it is all mass produced. What would be different for whom it is working out, something fast and easy, I think they don't have any complaints. But what would be missing in my point of view is that contextually, where are we? We're sitting in India,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And we have a whole lot of, and it's not just one state, all across all the states, there are a lot of these artisans and skill sets, whether it's furniture making or whether it's, wardrobe making, a lot of work with teak, rosewood, lot of these handmade lights with cane weaving,
And
webbing.
some beautiful tiles
Yes,
as
yes.
well. Yeah.
So, what's happening to them? Unless, designers like us are consciously also kind of putting these out in our projects, these will only become museum pieces.
Right.
And today, with, thanks to Modi ji, I don't want to get political here, but with this whole Make in India initiative and BIS, I think it's called, where we're importing only with very strict standards, we're able to import a material now from outside India. There's a huge difference in our field of architecture and interiors. There are many makers across India, furniture makers, and it needn't be that expensive. I'm not talking about a hand carved door which goes 1 lakh and beyond. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about, because of this Make in India, there are a lot of these small scale industries who are making furniture that is actually comfortable. And this skill set has been passed on for many generations.
Right. Right.
So I think when you come to designers like us, you will see that collaboration and weaving your whole home together with something that is natural and man-made as well.
Yeah. And there's some knowledge of, like you said, generations.
Yes,
Come down through generations,
Yes.
right? And that put in your house. I think that's
And labor of love.
yeah.
You can see that in some
Right.
parts of the home.
Yeah.
So
Okay, so I want to end this episode with your top 3 advice to the buyers out there who want to hire an architect. Like your 3 ultimate advice that you want to give.
you should be in a headspace where you're very clear of what you want.
Right.
Whether it's your functionalities, whether it's even aesthetics, if you all can do a little bit of research.
Yeah.
Because if you're not willing to experiment along with the
Right.
designer, there should be something that you come with.
Right.
So it's, we'll be finding it more easy and maybe efficient to kind of service, give you that kind of service.
And the output also.
Output
eventually is
also.
going to be like that.
And trust.
Okay.
I think maybe that goes first. That kind of stands on the top of the podium.
Okay.
And trust is first, and then a little bit of homework of what exactly you need.
Yeah.
And third, maybe would be, give everything you can at the design stage. Give all your decisions. Take time there. Go back. Think as much as you can to avoid delay once the work starts. Once the designs are frozen. The more you let us know in the beginning, the first few stages of design and conceptualizing,
Your tat is.
our
what-
output is much
yeah,
better.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think more than the Vastu, what I gather is the trust factor is
Yeah,
what you
yeah.
need from the clients, right? Until I think sometime I thought as a designer or as an architect, your biggest issue is constraint or obligation is Vastu, but I see that
I
as a
think we
trust-
kind of got immune to it, and we are like, it's a part and parcel of our work now. Yeah.
I get it. Okay. So I think it's been a very different kind of conversation for me, in terms of, it's always been about construction, what should I look at, location and all of that. But this is more personal, right?
Right.
Because everything that we spoke about today is about inside your house,
True.
your home. And it has been very, very interesting, very insightful. And I'm sure it's the same for the audience as well. Thank you so much for coming on our episode today.
Thanks,
And
Megha.
I'm sure our audience have a lot of takeaways from this episode. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Megha.